Hello everyone and welcome to the biology lecture series, and today we'll be discussing the topic respiration. We've already discussed some of the topics in the previous lecture. So in the previous lectures I have introduced you to the topic respiration, and then we have studied the metabolisms, what are the components of the metabolism, and then we studied about the types of the respiration. So respirations are of three types: external respiration, internal respiration, and then third one is the cellular respiration. So now if we talk about the cellular respiration, it is again of two types, aerobic respiration as well as the anaerobic respiration. So apart from this, we have also talked about the respiration in plants, because in plants there are no specialized structure present, okay, and the respiration is with the help of the stomata as well as the lenticels. Then we talked about the respiration in the lower organisms, and then finally we talked about the respiration in fish, in the aquatic animals, in the grasshopper, and then we finally discussed about the respiratory system in the complex organisms such as humans. All right, then we also solved some of the objective type questions in the previous lecture, and in this lecture we'll be discussing the rest of the topics. Okay, so here first again I will introduce you, again we'll discuss about the respiration and we'll talk about the photosynthesis also, and then we'll try to differentiate between the process of respiration as well as the photosynthesis. Okay, and in this lecture we'll further study the respiration process. What are the steps involved in the aerobic respiration? Okay, so first again let's have a look at the respiration. What is respiration? So respiration is a metabolic process which is present in the all living organisms, occurring biochemically. So these respiration, they occur biochemically within the cells. What does the biochemical means? Biochemically means it involves the enzymes. So these reactions, these are catalyzed by the enzymes. That's why they are known as the biochemical reactions. Okay, you can also call them physicochemical reactions. All right, you can call these biochemical reaction as physicochemical reactions. Clear? So now respiration, we know it is the oxidation of the respiratory substrates such as the carbohydrate, fats and proteins. Okay, so we have already discussed what were the respiratory substrate. Respiratory substrate is a molecule, you can say, or a substance that is oxidized during the respiration. So let's discuss what are the respiratory substrate. What are the types of the respiratory substrate? The first one is the carbohydrate, and among carbohydrates, glucose is the most readily available carbohydrate. So glucose is mostly used during the respiration, and oxidation of glucose results in production of the energy. Now if glucose is not available, other respiratory products such as proteins can be used, and fats can also be used. All right, we have talked about the respiratory quotient also. What was respiratory quotient? The volume of the oxygen evolved by the volume of the oxygen consumed during the respiration. And the RQ value is different for carbohydrate, proteins and the fat. So for carbohydrate, RQ value was 1. For proteins, it was around 0.5. And for fat, it is 0.7. So these are the RQ values. Okay. Now respiration. So by respiration or through this process, energy in the form of ATP is generated by the breakdown of the glucose, now which cells utilize for various functions. All right, this is clear. Now next one is the photosynthesis. What is photosynthesis? Photosynthesis is the process by which plants use sunlight, water and carbon dioxide to create oxygen and energy in the form of sugar. So this is known as the photosynthesis. Okay. So what is the equation for the photosynthesis? So we can write here the carbon dioxide, it combines with the water, and in the presence of what? In the presence of the sunlight as well as the chlorophyll. Okay, so in the presence of sunlight as well as the chlorophyll, the carbon dioxide, which are the inorganic molecules. So here what is happening? The simple molecules, they are being converted into complex molecules. Okay, so what is formed? C6H12O6 plus what is formed? Water is also formed and oxygen is also evolved in this process. Clear? So this is the glucose, which you can say is a complex molecule that is formed by the combination of the simple inorganic molecules such as carbon dioxide and water. So this happens during the photosynthesis. All right, so now you can label this, you can balance this equation. It will be 6H2O and 6O2. All right, this is clear. So this was about the photosynthesis, and it is what? It is an anabolic process. Whereas the photosynthesis is an anabolic process, whereas the respiration, it is a catabolic process. So what happens in anabolic process? The simple molecules, or you can say from the simple molecules, complex molecules are formed. Whereas during the catabolic process, what is happening? Opposite of this. The complex molecule, these are broken down into the simple molecules. All right, this is clear. Now, both this anabolic and catabolic process, they combine to, okay, so both of these combine and they are known as the metabolism. Okay, so metabolism involves both anabolic as well as the catabolic pathway. Now let's discuss about the differences between the respiration and the photosynthesis. All right, now the first difference is energy is liberated in the form of ATP during the respiration. Okay, if we talk about the aerobic respiration, during the aerobic respiration, 38 ATP are produced. Okay, and if we talk about the anaerobic respiration, during the anaerobic respiration, only 2 ATP are produced. Alright, so here ATP is being produced, which are the energy source. Now what happens in photosynthesis? Light energy is stored in the form of glucose, or you can say in the form of chemical energy. So what is happening during photosynthesis? The light energy, it is converted into the chemical energy. Light energy is converted into the chemical energy. All right. So what happens in respiration now? The release of carbon dioxide takes place. So we have already seen the equation of the respiration. So here C6H12O6, this in the presence of the oxygen, it forms carbon dioxide, water, as well as energy is released in the form of ATP. Okay, so if you can balance this equation, you can write 6O2, 6CO2 and 6H2O. So here you can see carbon dioxide released and ATP is being formed. But what happens in the photosynthesis? Carbon dioxide fixation or absorption of carbon dioxide from the environment takes place. So you can also write carbon dioxide fixation or carbon dioxide assimilation takes place during the photosynthesis. Okay, this is clear. Here one more thing you can see. So this was the equation for the respiration. All right. This was the glucose molecule. So here you can see the complex molecule, which is glucose, here is converted into simple inorganic molecules. So here you can consider glucose as a complex molecule which is being converted into simple molecules such as carbon dioxide and water. So you can say respiration is a catabolic process. Okay, what was catabolism or catabolic processes? In which the complex molecules are broken down into simple molecules. Whereas if we talk about the photosynthesis, what is the reaction for photosynthesis? Carbon dioxide, it reacts with the water and it forms what? A glucose molecule. And apart from this, oxygen evolution takes place and water is also generated. So if you can balance this equation, it will be like this. Here you can see photosynthesis, that's why an anabolic process. So this is also a difference between respiration and photosynthesis. Here the simple molecules, they are being converted into complex molecule glucose. All right. So during respiration, where does respiration takes place? It takes place in all living cells, both green as well as non-green. And what is the site of respiration? Respiration takes place in the mitochondria, which is known as the powerhouse of the cell. Whereas photosynthesis, what is the site for photosynthesis? It is the chloroplast. Okay, this is also one more difference. Here, if we talk about photosynthesis, it takes place only in the chlorophyllous cells. Chlorophyll cells means which contain the chlorophyll. Okay, these contain chlorophyll. All right. Now, during respiration, the dry weight of the plant will decrease because what is happening here? There is a breakdown of the organic molecules. So because of this, the dry weight, okay, or you can say breakdown of the complex organic molecules, okay, which leads to the decrease in the dry weight of the plant. But during photosynthesis, the dry weight of the plant increases because here there is the synthesis. And synthesis of what? There is a synthesis of the organic compounds. Okay, so because of this, the dry weight of the plant increases. All right, so one is the dry weight, one is the fresh weight. So dry weight is the weight of the plant, that is without the moisture or the water, and fresh weight is the weight of the plant, that is with the water content or with the moisture. Clear? Now next difference is the during respiration oxidative phosphorylation occurs and during photosynthesis photophosphorylation occurs. Okay, so during phosphorylation what happens? There is ATP synthesis. Okay, so ATP synthesis occurs during the phosphorylation. Now what is oxidative phosphorylation? So oxidative phosphorylation is the cellular process that harnesses the reduction of the oxygen. So oxygen is the terminal acceptor of the electrons during the respiration. Okay, so you can write oxygen, it is the terminal acceptor of the electrons. Terminal acceptor of electrons. Okay, and the oxygen, it is then converted into water. All right, so during oxidative phosphorylation, it harnesses the reduction of the oxygen to generate high energy phosphate bond in the form of adenosine triphosphate. So adenosine triphosphate, it consists of high energy phosphate bond. It has 3 phosphate, that's why the name triphosphate. Now what is photophosphorylation? Photophosphorylation is the process of utilizing the light energy from photosynthesis to convert ADP into ATP. Okay, so photo means light. So here the ATP synthesis is because or by the utilization of the light energy, that you receive from the sun. So here what is happening? In both these processes, ATP is being generated. So ADP, adenosine diphosphate, it combines with inorganic phosphate to form ATP. Alright. Now let's talk about the difference between respiration and the photosynthesis again. So here oxygen, carbon dioxide and water are formed. Alright, and carbon dioxide and water, they are used while oxygen is evolved. So this is what is happening during the photosynthesis. We have seen during the equation of the respiration that oxygen and carbon dioxide and water, they are formed, whereas during photosynthesis, inorganic molecules such as carbon dioxide and water, they combine together to form the glucose molecule, and in this process oxygen is also evolved. So this is the equation for the respiration and this is the equation for the photosynthesis. Now again, let's see a difference between the respiration and the combustion. So what are the difference between respiration and the combustion? First is the respiration is the biological process, whereas combustion is a chemical process. So why it is a chemical process? Because there is the release of the heat here. Alright, here there is a release of heat and it takes place at high temperature. Okay, and it is also an exothermic process. Means energy is released in the form of heat. So combustion is a chemical process. Now next difference is it takes place at the normal temperature, whereas combustion takes place at very high temperature. Now respiration, it is a very slow process and it is completed in several steps, means it is a multi-step process. Thus the energy is also liberated in several steps and it remains stored in the form of ATP. Okay, so ATP is generated, which is the source of the energy. Whereas in combustion, so combustion is a very fast process in which the energy is liberated only in one step. Okay, so it is not a multi-step process, whereas respiration is a multi-step process. Okay, whereas combustion is very fast and the energy is released in just one step, resulting in increase in the temperature and the production of the fire. Okay, this is clear. Now let's discuss about the cellular respiration. So already in the previous lecture I have given you a brief idea about the cellular respiration. So cellular respiration takes place inside the cell or within the cell. So what happens during cellular respiration? So it refers to the oxidation of the food taking place inside the cell. So this oxidation of the food is taking place inside the cell. That's why it is known as the cellular respiration. Now, as this process is at the cellular level, so it is called as the cellular respiration. So it refers to the oxidation of the food taking place inside the cell. Now, as this process is at the cellular level, it is known as the cellular respiration. It takes place in 3 steps. So for cellular respiration, cellular respiration is divided into 3 steps. So here we are talking about which kind of respiration? Aerobic respiration. Okay, so this aerobic respiration means it happens in the presence of the oxygen. Here oxygen is used to break down the complex molecules. Alright, that's why it is known as aerobic respiration, and these are the steps that are involved in the aerobic respiration. The first step is the glycolysis, second is the Krebs cycle, and third one is the electron transport system. So glycolysis, we have already discussed in the previous lecture that it is the common pathway for both aerobic and the anaerobic respiration, and there is no utilization of oxygen here. That's why it is a common pathway for both aerobic as well as anaerobic respiration, and glycolysis doesn't use any oxygen. Okay, here what is the site of glycolysis? Glycolysis takes place in the cytoplasm, and at the end of the glycolysis glucose is broken down into the pyruvic acid. Now Krebs cycle is involved in the energy production, means ATP production. Okay, And Krebs cycle, what is the site of Krebs cycle? It takes place in the mitochondria. Okay, this is the site for the Krebs cycle. Now, electron transport chain, it takes place in the membrane, in the mitochondrial membrane. Okay, so all the electron acceptors and the electron carriers, these are present in the membrane. Okay, clear? Now, this is then flowchart showing you the process of aerobic respiration as well as the anaerobic respiration. All right. So first, carbohydrates. They are digested and they are converted into simple form, that is the glucose. So glucose is a monosaccharide and glucose is the most readily available carbohydrate which takes place in the respiration. So during glycolysis, what is happening? The glucose molecule, here the glucose molecule it is converted into two molecules of the pyruvic acid. Now what happens? This pyruvic acid, so what is the fate of pyruvic acid here? So it can either undergo complete oxidation, which happens during the aerobic respiration. So it can undergo the complete oxidation. Okay, that is known as the aerobic respiration, or it can undergo incomplete oxidation. Okay, clear? So if it undergoes incomplete oxidation, then we call it anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration is also known as the fermentation. So here one type of fermentation is shown, that is the alcoholic fermentation, in which ethyl alcohol is produced. So C2H5OH, this is the ethyl alcohol. Apart from this, carbon dioxide is also produced and very small amount of energy is produced. Only 2 ATP are produced. Okay. So this happens when the incomplete oxidation of pyruvic acid takes place. But if pyruvic acid undergoes complete oxidation, then it will enter into the Krebs cycle. And during the Krebs cycle, what is produced? Carbon dioxide, water, as well as huge amount of energy is released. So 38 ATP molecules are released during the aerobic respiration. Now what is glycolysis? If you want to define glycolysis, so glycolysis, it is a process in which glucose is partially broken down by cells in the enzyme reactions that do not need the oxygen. So what does this mean? This means that glycolysis takes place without the need of, so there is no need of oxygen for the glycolysis, and there is partial breakdown of the glucose. So glucose, which is a 6-carbon molecule, C6H12O6, this is the glucose molecule. This is broken down into two molecules of a 3-carbon compound known as the pyruvic acid. Okay, this is a 3-carbon compound. So this is happening by the process known as glycolysis. So glycolysis is also a multi-step process and there are a lot of enzymes involved there. Okay, so we'll study about the glycolysis in the upcoming slides. Clear? Now let's study about the glycolysis first, which is the first step, you can say, of the aerobic as well as the anaerobic respiration. Now glycolysis is also known as the EMP pathway. Okay, why? Because it was discovered by 3 scientists named as Emden, Meyerhoff and Parnas. Okay, so they have taken the first alphabet of each of the scientists. So E stands for Emden, then M stands for Meyerhoff, okay, and then P stands for Parnas. So these were the 3 scientists who discovered the steps or the biochemical steps that are involved in the glycolysis. Okay, that's why glycolysis is also known as the EMP pathway. Now, what is the site of the glycolysis? It takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell. Now, here what happens? In this cycle, glucose is converted into pyruvic acid in the presence of many enzymes as well as coenzymes. So, a lot of enzymes are involved here. Okay, so there are different classes of enzymes that are involved here. So kinases are involved, which helps in the transfer of the phosphate group. Then isomerases are involved. So isomerase, they bring out the rearrangement of the molecules within the cell. Then some dehydrogenase are also involved. Okay. Then another enzyme, aldolase. Aldolase are also involved. Okay. Now, oxygen is not required during the glycolysis. Alright, and one molecule of glucose, it gives rise to two molecules of pyruvic acid at the end of the glycolysis. Now, in this process, four molecules of ATP are formed here. So, in the process of glycolysis, four molecules of ATP are formed. I will show you the flowchart of the glycolysis, and then you can understand at which steps these four molecules of glycolysis are formed, and two molecules of ATP are utilized. Okay, so the net gain of ATP will be two molecules. So 4 ATP are synthesized. Okay, so you can read. Okay, these are synthesized, but 2 ATP are utilized. So what will be the net gain here? Net gain will be 2 ATP. Now, apart from ATP, NADPH2 molecules, they are also synthesized. So 2 NADP molecules are reduced to NADPH2 during the glycolysis. Okay, and 1 NADPH2 molecules, it forms 3 ATP. So here 2 molecules of ADP are formed, NADPH are formed. Okay, so this will give rise to 6 ATP. 6 ATP will form. So in total, how many ATP? 6 plus 2, 8 ATP will be generated by the process of glycolysis. So the overall production of ATP will be 2 ATP plus 6 ATP. So these ATP are coming from NADPH2. And in total, 8 ATP are produced during the glycolysis. Now there is no production of carbon dioxide during the glycolysis. Alright, so here I've given you a note. After glycolysis, the pyruvic acid is converted into acetyl coenzyme A with the release of the carbon dioxide, and the process is known as oxidative decarboxylation. So we have studied about the steps of the aerobic respiration. What were the steps? First step was the glycolysis. Okay, at the end of the glycolysis, pyruvic acid is produced. Now this pyruvic acid, it cannot enter the mitochondria directly. It cannot enter into mitochondria. Alright, this is clear. So what happens? Oxidative decarboxylation of this pyruvic acid takes place. Alright, so second, you can also write oxidative decarboxylation. This is the second step. Okay, oxidative decarboxylation of the pyruvic acid takes place, and the coenzyme A is added, and the pyruvic acid is converted into acetyl coenzyme A. Okay, so during oxidative decarboxylation, what happens? The pyruvic acid, also known as the pyruvate, this is converted into acetyl coenzyme A. And this acetyl coenzyme A, now it can enter the mitochondria, and it will take part in the Krebs cycle. Clear? So this process is known as oxidative decarboxylation. Then after that, you can write third will be the Krebs cycle. Okay, and fourth will be the electron transport chain. Clear? So now this occurs in the mitochondria of the cell, oxidative decarboxylation. This Krebs cycle takes place in the mitochondria. So we can write Krebs cycle. It occurs in the mitochondria. Okay. So pyruvic acid cannot enter into the mitochondria. The first, it is converted into acetyl coenzyme A, and then acetyl coenzyme A can take part in the Krebs cycle that is happening in the mitochondria. Okay. Now, beside this, 6 ATP are also formed during this step. So during the oxidative, so during this step, oxidative carboxylation, 2 NADPH2 molecules are synthesized. All right. So one NADPH molecule correspond to 3 ATP. So two molecules will be synthesized so that they produce or they generate 6 ATP. Clear? So now earlier during glycolysis 8 ATP were produced and during oxidative carboxylation 6 ATP is produced. So we can add 8 plus 6 will give rise to. So till now 14 ATP have been generated during these two steps, glycolysis and the oxidative decarboxylation. Now glycolysis we have already studied. It involves the transformation of glucose to pyruvate and it involves 10 steps. So it is a multi-step process. It involves a lot of enzymes also and whole glycolysis takes place in the 10th step and it can be characterized into preparatory phase and the payoff phase. Alright, so first is the preparatory phase and second is the payoff phase. So during preparatory phase, ATP are synthesized. Alright, and then later on ATP are utilized. Now during the preparatory phase, glucose is converted into glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and dihydroxyacetone phosphate. So you can divide the process of the glycolysis into two phases. First is the preparatory phase, so this is the first phase, and second is the payoff phase. So this is the second phase. Now preparatory phase is till the formation of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Okay, so in this image you can see the preparatory phase. So it is till the formation of glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and the dihydroxyacetone phosphate. So this image shows you the preparatory phase. Okay, this is the preparatory phase. During this phase, you can see ATP is utilized. So ATP, so first glucose is converted into glucose 6-phosphate. Here what happens? ATP is being utilized and ATP is converted into ADP and the phosphate here attaches with the glucose molecule forming glucose 6-phosphate. Now glucose 6-phosphate isomerizes into glucose 6-phosphate. So here isomerases enzymes are involved and here kinase enzyme will be involved. Okay, so here kinase enzymes are involved. Here isomerase class of enzymes, isomerases, that will be involved. Here again you can see there is a transfer of phosphate molecules from ATP to the fructose. So fructose 6-phosphate converted into fructose 1,6-phosphate and here again ATP is being utilized. So that's why it is known as the preparatory phase. Here there is utilization of the ATP. So ATP is being utilized. Okay, now fructose 1,6-bisphosphate is further converted into a triose phosphate, means it consists of 3 carbon atoms. So it is glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and another triose phosphate is found which is known as dihydroxyacetone phosphate. So this is an reversible reaction. So there is an interconversion between the glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and the dihydroxyacetone phosphate. Okay, this is clear. Now you can see here NADH molecules are also being synthesized. Okay, and we have seen that the one NADH molecule, it gives rise to 3 ATP. Okay, now here you can see this is the second phase, the payoff phase. This is the payoff phase. Okay, so one thing you have to remember when we talk about the mitochondria, if we are talking about the mitochondria, then NADH molecules are formed. And if we talk about the photosynthesis, then you should use NADPH. Okay. So these are the reduced coenzymes. Both of these are reduced coenzymes, but in mitochondria, it is NADH. During photosynthesis, it is NADPH. So here we'll talk about NADH. So one NADH corresponds to 3 ATP. Okay. So during payoff phase, what is happening? This triose bisphosphate. Okay, you can say this glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate is converted into 1,3-bisphosphoglyceric acid. and here there is a generation of the ATP. Okay, so here two molecules were formed, so two molecules of ATP will be formed here. Then further, 3-phosphoglyceric acid is converted into 2-phosphoglyceric acid. You can also call 2-phosphoglyceric acid a 2-phosphoglycerate. Here you can see, then later on two molecules are again being synthesized here. Here also two molecules are being synthesized here. And in the end, 2-phosphoglycerate is converted into 2-phosphopyruvate, 2-phosphoenol pyruvate. So this is phosphoenol pyruvate, PEP. Okay, and then later on, phosphoenol pyruvate is converted into pyruvic acid, which is a 3-carbon compound. So you can see two molecules of pyruvic acid are formed at the end. Okay, so here also two molecules of ATP will be synthesized. So during this phase, 4 ATP are synthesized. Okay, and during the preparative phase, 2 ATP were utilized. So we can reduce 2 ATP from 4 ATP, and the net gain during the glycolysis will be 2 ATP molecules. Now apart from this, 2 NADH molecules are also synthesized. So this means 6 ATP are also generated. So in total we can say 2 plus 6 ATP. Okay, and this combines to form 8 ATP. This is clear. So this was the process of glycolysis in short. Okay, so starting with the glucose, here pyruvic acid is formed. Two molecules of pyruvic acid are formed. Okay, this is clear. So in the preparative phase, 2 molecules of ATP are utilized, and during the payoff phase, 4 molecules of ATP are synthesized. And you have to also remember that in the mitochondria, you have to use NADH, and during the photosynthesis, you have to use NADPH. Okay, so if I have used NADPH, you should use NADH instead of NADPH in case of mitochondria. Alright, this is clear. So this was the end of this session. We'll talk about rest of the topics in the next session. Thank you very much for listening.